Have you ever stood in a room full of everything you ever wanted only to realize it's actually a prison? That was me, standing at the foot of a California king bed at 2 a.m. holding a suitcase. Let me paint the picture for you. It's Atlanta in July, which means the air outside is thick enough to chew. But inside this house, it's climate controlled to a perfect 68 degrees. Cold, just like him. Richard was asleep, of course. He sleeps like the dead peaceful, unbothered, while I'm over here having a silent panic attack, trying to figure out if the zipper on my suitcase is too loud. It was a Samsonite, hard shell. Navy blue, I packed it fast but not sloppy. I grabbed 2 pairs of slacks, 3 blouses, and this is the sad part. I packed clothes that were 2 sizes too big. I grabbed my heavy wool coat from the back of the closet. I know, it's 90 degrees outside, but I needed that coat. I shoved my hand deep into the pocket and my fingers brushed against paper. Crinkly, stained paper. I pulled it out. It was that list, the one I scribbled down 3 years ago. You could see the coffee rings on it. Battered Women's Shelter, Pro Bono Divorce Attorneys, Legal Aid Atlanta. That last one, circled 3 times in red ink. I looked at that paper and I swear, I could feel the ghost of that night in 2018. That was the night he threw the lasagna against the wall. Because the cheese had congealed, I remember the sound of the ceramic shattering. I remember flinching, covering my face, waiting for him to come at me. Instead, he just stepped over the mess, looked at me, and said, "Clean it up, Valencia." A queen doesn't live in filth. A queen. Right, I felt like a prisoner. I crept downstairs. The wood floors in that house are expensive. Italian oak, but I knew exactly which boards groaned. I avoided them. I walked past the kitchen island and his iPad glowed in the dark. A notification slid across the glass. A text message from his assistant, Kevin. It said, "Don't worry about the auditor." I handled the ledger. I stared at it for a heartbeat. The ledger? Richard told me he didn't have auditors. I told myself not to stop, not to think, just to breathe. I'd worry about Kevin and the ledgers later. Right now, I had a jar to steal. I went into the pantry, the one that's the size of a studio apartment. I reached behind the boxes of organic quinoa and the imported pasta, the stuff he insisted on buying to impress his business partners. And I grabbed the mason jar. It wasn't hidden. Richard is arrogant. He never thinks to look behind the lentils. I unscrewed the lid. $800. One's 5s, a couple of 20s. It was cash I'd skinned off the grocery budget for 3 years. "Here's 200 for the week, Val," he'd say, handing me 100. Be creative. I was creative. I bought generic. I used coupons. I starved a little so I could buy my freedom. The money smelled like spices and stale air, and my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the jar on the tile. I stood there in the shadows of my own kitchen, clutching this jar of dirty money, and I looked back up the stairs. I could see the master bedroom door cracked open. I thought about going back in there. I thought about climbing into that cold bed and just disappearing. But then I heard him snore. That sound, it wasn't just sleep. It was entitlement. Men like Richard count on silence. They think the money and the house are the cage. But the real cage is in your head. I walked to the front door. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a bird trapped in a chimney. I put my hand on the handle. It was cool brass. I turned it. I didn't look back. I stepped out into the humidity. The air hit me like a wet towel. It was heavy, it was hot, and it was real. I closed the door softly. Click. That sound was louder than the plate smashing. It was louder than his voice. It was the end of Valencia Ashford, the homemaker, and the beginning of, well, I didn't know what yet. I stood on the driveway in my sensible loafers, staring at the Porsche in the driveway that I wasn't allowed to drive, and realized I had nowhere to go. I had $800, a suitcase full of clothes 2 sizes too big, and a soul that felt like it had been put through a wood chipper. But I was free. Or so I thought. I stood there on the driveway, the humidity in Atlanta at 2 a.m. wrapping around me like a hot, wet towel, suffocating and heavy. Behind me, the house was dark, a giant mausoleum of a life I wasted 24 years building, staring back at me with empty windows. I looked at the Porsche in the garage, then at the Samsonite suitcase in my hand, and then at the mason jar full of crumpled 20s. I couldn't stay there. If Richard woke up and found me, or worse, if Kevin came back, I was dead. I got into my car, I won't even grace it by naming the model, and I just drove. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. And I remember thinking, where do you go when you have nowhere? I drove until I saw the sign, Extended Stay America on Peachtree Industrial. It wasn't the Ritz, but it had a vacancy and it took cash. The guy at the counter, Mateo, looked tired. Just a kid, really. But he gave me a key to room 104 without asking too many questions. He just slid the key card across the counter and gave me a sympathetic nod that almost broke me. I walked into that room and the smell hit me, first stale cigarette smoke, aggressively masked with cheap lemonless Sol. It was the scent of desperation. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was hard, covered in a scratchy polyester spread. That probably hadn't been changed since the Bush administration, and I just stared at the stained carpet. I was alone. Truly alone. Then, I opened a mason jar, I dumped the cash out onto the dingy bedside table and started counting. 1, 2, 3, $800. That was it. That was my net worth after 2.5 decades of marriage. I started to panic. My throat was parched, dry like I'd swallowed sandpaper. I realized I hadn't had a drink of water in hours. I grabbed my purse and drove to the Quick Trip down the street. I needed a bottle of water, maybe a pack of gum, something normal to ground me. I went to the counter, swiped my debit card, the joint account Richard managed, and waited. The cashier sighed, that specific sound of annoyance reserved for late-night convenience store workers, and said, "Declined." I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "Try it again," I said. "There's plenty of money in there." She swiped it again. Declined. My stomach dropped. I ran to the ATM in the corner, jammed the card in, and asked for a mini statement. The printer whirred, slow and agonizing, and spat out a thin slip of paper. I looked at the balance. $0.00. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scanned the transactions. The last one, a pending withdrawal for the entire balance, dated 1:15 a.m., 1 hour before I walked out the door. The payee? Security Systems LLC. That didn't make sense. We didn't have a security system company. And then, like a slap in the face, the memory hit me. It was 2005. We were in the kitchen of that big, cold house. I was holding a checkbook, asking why I didn't have my own account. Richard snatched it from my hands, smiling that cold, tight-lipped smile, and said, "You don't need your own account, Valencia. I handle everything. You just focus on looking beautiful." I remember the way his fingers dug into the checkbook like he was physically barring me from my own life. And then I thought about his office, the home office. For years I wasn't allowed in there. God forbid I touched the filing cabinet. Richard would scream if I even walked past the door with a dust cloth. He always insisted on handling the shredding personally, every single Sunday afternoon, feeding papers into that loud machine while I made dinner. I sat on the edge of that motel bed staring at that receipt showing a zero balance, and the despair finally set in. I wasn't just broke, I was erased. My husband wasn't just rich, he was strategic. He had frozen me out before I even cleared the driveway. I sat there on the edge of the mattress, the coils digging into my thighs, staring at the peeling floral wallpaper in room 104. It was 3:30 in the morning. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the low, aggressive hum of the mini fridge in the corner. The air smelled of industrial Lysol and that weird stale sweetness that never really leaves extended stay motels no matter how much they scrub. I looked at the ATM receipt on the nightstand again. $0. I had $800 in a mason jar and a suitcase full of wool blouses. That suddenly felt like a costume from a life I didn't own anymore. I couldn't just sit here. Panic is expensive, and I couldn't afford it. I needed a plan. I needed income. I pulled my laptop out of the bag. It's an old HP, heavy as a brick, and the fan sounded like a jet engine taking off when I pressed the power button. I connected to the extended stay guest network. The signal was weak, but eventually it held steady enough. I pulled up. Indeed, I needed something now. I didn't have the luxury of a career search. I typed administrative assistant into the search bar, filtering for urgently hiring, and immediate start. I scrolled past the warehouse jobs and the overnight shifts at call centers. My eyes landed on a listing for a legal secretary at a firm called Harrington and Tate. It was downtown, paying $45,000 a year. To some people, that might not sound like much. But right then, it looked like a fortune. It looked like survival. The description said they needed someone organized, professional, and discreet. I thought I ran a household with a staff of 12. Staff of 12 for a man who entertained senators. I am the definition of discreet. I felt a small spark of heat in my chest. I can do this. I clicked apply now. My fingers were trembling, just a little, hovering over the keys. I entered my name, Valencia Ashford. My address, well, I put the address of the extended stay on Peachtree Industrial. I entered my work history. I stared at the last 24 years gap. I typed Ashford residence, homemaker, executive household manager. I hesitated for a split second, wondering if I should embellish, wondering if Richard was right, when he said no one would ever take me seriously without his name attached to him. But I hit submit anyway. The little loading circle spun. It spun for a long time. I watched the cursor blink. Finally, the screen changed. Application received. I exhaled a sharp, short breath. I sat back, waiting for the adrenaline to fade, feeling a momentary sense of relief. But then my hand moved before my brain could stop it. I refreshed the page. It's a nervous tick. I just wanted to see if it said received or processing. I wanted to see my name in the system, proving I existed. I stared at the screen. The status had changed. It now read not selected. I blinked. I checked the time on the bottom right of the screen. 3:47 a.m. I had submitted the application 4 minutes ago. 4 minutes. I refreshed again. Status update, unsuitable candidate. No, I whispered to the empty room. No, that's impossible. I tried to click on the details, but there was nothing else. Just that cold, final word, unsuitable. My brain started doing that thing where it races so fast you can't catch a single thought. Was it the gap in employment? Was it the motel address? Or was it something else? I grabbed my phone. I searched for the number for Harrington and Tate. It was 3:48 a.m. I knew nobody was in the office, but I needed to hear a voice. I needed to prove the machine was wrong. I dialed the number listed on the contact page. It rang and rang. I was about to hang up when the line clicked. A woman's voice answered, sounding bored and wide awake at the same time. Recruitment screening line, how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling about an application I just submitted. Valencia Ashford. The status changed instantly to not selected. I need to know why. I heard the sound of mechanical typing on a keyboard. Fast. Efficient. Then she paused. Ma'am, I'm looking at the automated screening results here. The system flagged your profile instantly. We cannot proceed with the hiring process. Flagged? I asked, my voice cracking. For what? I haven't even interviewed yet. She sighed, that heavy put-upon sigh that says, you are wasting her time. Ma'am, the system code is unsuitable candidate. That usually means a background check failure or a credit score discrepancy. I don't have access to the specific disqualifiers, and I cannot discuss this further. You will receive a formal email notification within 48 hours. Goodbye. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone to my ear, the dial tone buzzing loud and accusing. The sun was coming up over the parking lot of the Extended Stay America, and it looked like a bruised peach. You know that time of morning? The sky is this sickly mix of purple and yellow, hitting the asphalt and making everything look dirty. I hadn't slept. Not a single minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that unsuitable candidate status glowing on the HP laptop screen like a radioactive warning sign. Richard, he was everywhere. He wasn't in the room, but he was in the algorithm. He was in the digital DNA of the city. He had spent 24 years curating my life, picking out the clothes I wore, the friends I kept, the thoughts I was allowed to think. And now he was curating my unemployment. It made me sick to my stomach, literally. I dry heaved over that cheap plastic toilet bowl around 6 tannins. The smell of the Lysol I'd used to scrub the room the night before mixed with the smell of my own fear. It was a sensory nightmare. My head was pounding, a rhythmic throb behind my left eye that felt like a ticking clock. Time was up, that was the message. Time was up. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at my hands. They used to be soft, manicured. Richard liked them soft. He'd say, "A lady doesn't work with her hands, Valencia. A lady directs." Well, look at me now. I was directionless and my bank account was sitting at zero. That $800 Mason dollar jar money was all I had left in the world. And this room? It cost $60 a night plus tax. Do the math. I had about 2 weeks before I was truly homeless on the street. And I couldn't get a job. Not a real one. Not an office job where I could sit in air conditioning and answer phones. The automated systems, the gatekeepers, they were all slamming the door in my face before I even knocked. I needed something that didn't ask for a social security number. Something that didn't care about a credit score that Richard had likely destroyed years ago. I needed something off the grid. I needed dirty cash. Around 7:30 a.m., I walked out of room 104. I put on my wool coat. It was getting crisp outside, that Atlanta snap in the air that cuts right through you. And I headed to the lobby. The air smelled like stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. There was a guy behind the desk. Night manager. I'd seen him the night before when I checked in, shivering like a wet dog. His name tag said Mateo. He looked tired. The kind of tired that goes bone deep, the kind that comes from working double shifts and sleeping on a friend's couch. I leaned on the counter. I tried to look confident, like I was still the woman who owned the Porsche in the driveway, not the woman who was running from it. I asked him, "You got any openings?" "I can clean, I can do laundry, anything." Mateo looked at me, really looked at me. He saw the wool coat, the navy slacks that were wrinkled from being in the suitcase. He saw the desperation I was trying to hide behind the makeup I hadn't refreshed in 8 hours. He didn't ask for a resume, thank God. He didn't ask for references or why a 51-year-old woman was looking for housekeeping work at a budget motel. In Peachtree Industrial at 7:30 in the morning, he just said, "I gotta check out on the 3rd floor. I trashed it. Needs a deep clean. $12 an hour. Cash. You start now?" He didn't know. He didn't know who I was or what I was running from. He just saw a woman who needed to work. I almost cried right there. I swallowed it down, felt the lump in my throat hard like a stone, and I said, "I'm on my way." He handed me a cart. Yellow plastic. Bins of rough white towels. Spray bottles of bleach and glass cleaner. It smelled like high school chemistry class, sharp and burning, attacking the back of my throat. I walked into room 312. Oh, it was bad. Stale beer, pizza boxes with congealed cheese, wet towels thrown on the floor like dead animals. It looked like a crime scene. I stripped the bed, my hand shaking slightly as I pulled the sheets off, the elastic snapping against my wrists. That smell triggered it, the flashback. It hit me so hard I had to grab the edge of the dresser. Suddenly I wasn't in a motel in Peachtree Industrial. I was in 2015, the Metropolitan Club. I was wearing this Carolina Herrera gown, navy blue, with these delicate beaded straps that cost more than this maid made in a month. I remember holding a champagne flute, the bubbles tickling my nose. Richard was there, shaking hands, laughing that loud, barking laugh that always commanded the room. The room was sparkling, chandeliers reflecting off the marble floors. I looked at my hand then, holding that crystal flute. It was perfect. The nails were painted Appy You Don't Know Jacques, a deep, rich, chocolatey color. I felt like a queen. Men like Richard count on silence. And in that gown, I was the silent decoration he always wanted. And now, here I was, on my knees, scrubbing a toilet bowl that looked like a biohazard. My manicure, what was left of it from the night before, was chipped. One nail, the index finger on my right hand, broke clean off scrubbing a glob of toothpaste off the mirror. I looked at myself in that dirty, streaked mirror. My hair was falling out of its clip. My eyes were red and rimmed with exhaustion. But here is the twisted part. The air didn't feel heavy. In that mansion on West Pacesbury, the air was always so thick with Richard's expectations. With the silence of the staff, with the pressure to be perfect, to be on. In room 312, smelling of bleach and cheap beer, the air was just... I scrubbed until my arms ached. I scrubbed the tub until my back screamed in protest. I wiped the baseboards. I did the work, and it felt real. 2 hours later, I pushed the heavy, squeaky cart back to the laundry room. I found Mateo in the hallway, checking his clipboard. I must have looked like a mess. Sweat on my forehead, smelling like industrial cleaner, my wool coat discarded over the handle of the cart. He didn't say much. He didn't give me a pat on the back or a good job. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. It was crumpled at the edges, stained slightly with coffee. He handed it to me. 4 hours, he said, his voice flat, plus a little extra. That bathroom looked like a war zone. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, dense. I opened it up and looked inside, a wad of bills. 20s, 10s, a few 5s. I counted it right there in the hallway, my fingers trembling. $140. Wait, no. Let me back up. I counted again. $120. He paid me $30 an hour, essentially. Or maybe he just rounded up. Actually, looking at the way he looked away, refusing to make eye contact, I think he slipped me an extra 20. Pity money. It should have stung. It should have made me feel small. And it did, a little. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but mostly, it felt like survival. I walked back to room 104, clutching the envelope so hard my knuckles turned white. I locked the door behind me, the click echoing in the silent room. I sat on the edge of that stiff polyester-covered bedspread, and I counted the money one more time. It was real. It wasn't numbers on a screen that Richard could manipulate with a phone call to a bank manager. It wasn't a credit limit he could lower to punish me for spending too much on groceries. It was green paper, dirty, wrinkled, smelly paper. I traded champagne for bleach, but for the first time in 24 years, the money in my pocket was actually mine. You ever scrubbed a hotel bathtub for 6 hours straight? My back felt like it was made of broken glass and rust. I sat on the edge of that cheap mattress, staring at the pile of money on the ugly floral bedspread. $140. It was mostly crumbled 5s and 10s, smelling like lemon-scented disinfectant and the bleach from my yellow plastic cart. It didn't look like the money we used to have, the kind that paid for the season tickets at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium without a second glance. This money felt heavy. It felt like I scraped it out of the gutter with my own fingernails. And honestly, I was starving. I hadn't eaten since the panic set in yesterday, but the thought of walking to the Quick Trip in the Atlanta humidity made me want to curl up and disappear. I just sat there, vibrating with exhaustion, watching the neon sign from the Waffle House across the street flash orange and blue through the curtains. I finally collapsed, fully dressed, praying the nightmares would stay away. They didn't, but something worse woke me up at 3 a.m. A buzzing sound. Violent. Aggressive. I fumbled for the prepaid phone on the nightstand, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The screen lit up the dark room. Unknown caller. I knew. Before I even swiped to answer, I knew. It was him. I pressed the phone to my ear, holding my breath. Valencia. Just my name. Not honey, not baby. Just my name in that tone, that smooth, bored, terrifyingly calm tone. He sounded like he was calling to confirm a tea time, not like he was hunting down his wife who'd been missing for 24 hours. You're being childish, he said, coming out of the house like that, leaving the door unlocked. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you look? I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, like I was swallowing a golf ball. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. He sighed that long-suffering exhale he used to do when I forgot to buy the right brand of sparkling water. I'm doing this for your own good, he said. I'd had to freeze everything, the cards, the accounts. I have to protect us. He paused, and the silence on the line was heavy, suffocating. You've always been so irresponsible with money, Valencia. You don't understand the complexities. You never did. If I let you loose with a checkbook, you'd ruin us in a week. I'm just watching out for your credit. He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the room spinning, the cheap plastic phone burning in my hand. Irresponsible? I remembered the dates. I remembered the numbers. For 24 years, I managed his social calendar, his charity galas, his business dinners, all in my head. I never forgot a birthday, an anniversary, or a quarterly tax deadline. He used my memory like a Rolodex, treating me like a parlor trick. But I was irresponsible with money? I never saw the bills. I never saw the statements. He forbade it. He said it stressed me out. And then it hit me, sitting there in the dark at 3001 a.m. If he drained the accounts, if he took every cent to Security Systems LLC, why is he so worried about my credit score now? Why bring up my irresponsibility unless there was something on those statements he was terrified I'd actually see? He called to see if I knew. And that makes me wonder, what was he hiding in the books? I walked into the Atlanta Fulton Public Library on a Thursday morning feeling like a fugitive. Which, I suppose I was. The air conditioning was cranked up so high it felt like walking into a meat locker. A sharp contrast to the humid, suffocating heat of the Atlanta pavement outside. I found a computer terminal in the far back corner, sandwiched between the biography section and a row of dusty tax codes. The keyboard was greasy, the kind of sticky that makes your skin crawl, and the monitor had a dead pixel in the center. It flickered like a nervous eye. I sat down, pulling my wool coat tighter around me even though I was sweating. I looked over my shoulder, not once but 3 times. Richard had eyes everywhere, or at least my brain was convinced he did. I felt like I was planting a bomb instead of checking a credit score. I pulled up the browser. My hands were trembling so badly I actually missed the keys the first time I typed in the web address. I went to one of those free credit report sites. I had to create a new account. It asked for my address, my social security number, my date of birth, information I've given Richard blindly for 24 years. Now, typing it into a public terminal, it felt like I was handing weapons to a stranger. The site wanted to verify my identity. It sent a code to my prepaid phone. I stared at that little plastic flip phone for a full 10 seconds, terrified the screen would flash, "Richard Ashard is watching you." It didn't. It just buzzed with a 6-digit code. I typed it in. I held my breath. The little rainbow circle spun on the screen. Loading. Loading. And then the dashboard appeared. You know how there are moments in life where time just stops? Where the noise of the world drops out, and all you hear is the blood rushing in your ears? That happened. Right there. In the quiet library, with the smell of floor wax and old paper. In the center of the screen was a gauge. And the number on it wasn't 700, it wasn't 650, it wasn't even 500, it was 315. I put my hand over my mouth to stop the scream that was clawing its way at my throat. A librarian looked over at me, annoyed by the sudden movement, but I couldn't care less. 315, that's not a credit score. That's a room temperature. That's a batting average. That is a financial death sentence. I felt the blood drain from my face, cold and fast. I scrolled down, fighting the urge to vomit right there on the sticky keyboard. There were accounts. So many accounts. 14 open accounts in collections. 14. The total debt listed was over $200,000. I saw credit cards I had never seen in my wallet. Maxed out lines of credit from banks I didn't even know existed. And then I saw the dates. The oldest account was opened in 2010. The memory hit me so hard. It physically hurt, like a punch to the chest. It was a Tuesday morning in May 2010. I remember because the azaleas in the backyard were in full bloom, exploding with color. Richard was standing at the kitchen island in his golf attire, looking sharp and smelling like sandalwood and expensive scotch. He slid a thick stack of papers across the granite counter toward me. He was smiling. That tight-lipped, controlled smile that never reached his eyes. He said, "Just sign these, Valencia. It's the annual insurance update. For the properties. You know how those underwriters are. They need the spouse's signature for the liability rider." I didn't read them. Why would I? I trusted him. He was the provider. He was the genius with the numbers. I picked up his Mont Blanc pen, the heavy black one he kept in a leather case, and I signed page after page. I initialed the corners. I signed my name away without reading a single word. He watched me do it. He watched me sign loan documents, credit applications, and lines of credit, and he told me it was for insurance. I sat there in the library staring at a score of 315 and realized that the man I slept next to for 2 decades hadn't just been controlling me, he had been using me. He had turned me into a human shield for his debts. I wasn't just poor, I was radioactive. Every time I applied for a job, for an apartment, for a life. This number was popping up to tell the world that Valencia Ashford was a thief, a fraud, a risk. He hadn't just drained the bank accounts, he had destroyed my future. He knew I would never check. He knew I would trust him. Men like Richard count on silence. They count on you not looking too close at the books. Well, I was looking now, and it wasn't just that I had no credit, someone had systematically destroyed me. And I knew exactly who. You ever sat in a room full of people and felt completely, utterly invisible? That's the Atlanta Fulton Public Library on a Thursday morning. The air conditioning was humming so loud it sounded like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. It mixed with the smell of old paper and that distinct lemony floor wax they use on government linoleum. I was sandwiched between a teenager blasting rap music through his headphones and a homeless man arguing with himself. But I felt like I was the only person on Earth. Because right there on a computer terminal that probably still ran on Windows 98, my entire life had just been rewritten. That credit score 315 wasn't just a number, it was an obituary for the person I thought I was. But I couldn't look away, I had to know the how. I had to know the when. My cursor hovered over the accounts tab. My heart was doing this weird, fluttery thing like a bird trapped in a rib cage. I clicked it, and there it was, the hit list, 14 open accounts in collections. I started scrolling, reading the dates, and that's when the cold sweat really broke out on the back of my neck. The dates, they all started in 2001. I froze. 2001, that was the year Richard and I got married. May 26, 2001 to be exact. We had a big church wedding in Buckhead. I wore a Carolina Herrera gown. I thought I was marrying a successful accountant who wanted to take care of me. Turns out, I was just the co-signer. I clicked on the oldest one, a personal loan from a bank that doesn't even exist anymore. The open date read June 15, 2001. We were still in Maui for our honeymoon. I remember that day clearly. We were eating overpriced lobster by the ocean. Richard told me he was going to step away to make some business calls to secure our future. He was securing his future, all right. He was securing it with my social security number. I felt sick. Actually physically ill, like I'd swallowed a stone. I hit the button to download the original application document. The library Wi-Fi is slow, so it took about 30 seconds. 30 seconds of me staring at a spinning circle, wondering if I was about to throw up all over the keyboard. Then the PDF popped up. It was pixelated and grainy, scanned from a paper file that had probably been sitting in a dusty box for a decade. I zoomed in on the signature line, and there it was, Valencia Ashford. But it wasn't my handwriting. See, I have a very specific way I sign my name. I dot the I with a little circle. It's a habit I've had since college. This signature? This was a messy, jagged scrawl. It looked like a spider had fallen in an inkwell and tried to walk across the page. It was Richard's handwriting. He had forged my name on a $50,000 loan while I was 3 margaritas deep by the hotel pool. I was thinking my husband was planning our 10-year anniversary. The irony is almost funny. Almost. I looked at the income listed on the application. He put my income down as 0, which was true in 2001, and his as retainer. But the debt was mine. The liability was mine. If the business failed, and I guess it did fail spectacularly, the bank wouldn't come looking for the smart husband who set up the shell corporation. They would come looking for the housewife with the forged signature. He didn't marry me for love. He didn't marry me for my pot roast. He married me because I had pristine credit and a blind trust that stretched for miles. I was a human shield. I sat back in that chair, the vinyl squeaking under me, and I just stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights were buzzing, flickering like they were shorting out. I thought about all the times he told me, Valencia, don't worry about the finances. That's man's work. Or, you're too emotional to understand the complexities of investment. He wasn't protecting me from stress. He was protecting himself from prison. I wasn't a partner in this marriage. I was a vessel for his fraud. A pawn to be moved across the board, sacrificed if necessary to save the king. But here's the thing about pawns. Sometimes they make it all the way across the board. And when they do, they become the most powerful piece on the table. Richard Ashford thought he bought himself a maid and a scapegoat. He didn't realize he just woke up a sleeping giant. I closed the browser, cleared the history, and grabbed my bag. I needed to get out of there before I screamed. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. And I was going to take the king down. Men like Richard count on silence. They bank on the idea that the women they terrorize will simply shrink. That we will become so small, so afraid of our own shadows, that we will never dare to speak up. I walked out of the Atlanta Fulton Public Library that morning carrying a digital file that could burn Richard's empire to the ground. but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The sun was already high, that brutal Georgia humidity wrapping around me like a wet wool blanket. But inside, I was ice cold. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced that every silver Porsche was him. But he wasn't there. He was probably in his office, shredding more documents, counting on the fact that Valencia was just too stupid to do the math. By the time I got back to the extended stay America, I was vibrating. Not from caffeine, but from sheer, unadulterated rage. I walked into the lobby, and the smell hit me, that weird combination of stale bleach, mildew, and that industrial coffee. Mateo was behind the front desk, his nose buried in a textbook that looked thicker than a dictionary. He looked up, and I guess my face told him everything he needed to know. He didn't say a word. He just stood up, went to the little pot in the corner, and poured me a cup of that sludge. He slid a packet of sugar across the laminate counter. I just leaned against the counter, clutching that warm styrofoam cup like it was a life raft. I don't know why I told him. Maybe it was the sleep deprivation. Maybe it was because he was the first person in 24 years to look at me without an agenda. I looked at Mateo and said, "He stole my signature. He stole my name." Mateo didn't flinch. He just nodded, like he'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop since the day I dragged my suitcase in here. He came around the desk, closing his book. "Show me," he said. And for the next 20 minutes, sitting on one of those cracked vinyl lobby chairs, I laid it all out. The forgery from 2001, the 315 credit score. The fact that I was legally radioactive to any automated hiring system in the country. I told him how Richard used my name as a human shield for his debt. How he made me the fall guy for $200,000 of embezzlement. I was shaking, I'm not gonna lie. My hands were trembling so hard the coffee was sloshing over the side of the cup. Mateo listened, really listened. And when I finished, he didn't offer me pity. He looked at me with this respect. It was the first time I felt seen in years. He told me he was studying IT, network security specifically. He told me that Richard might think he's smart, but men like Richard always leave a digital footprint. He pulled his own laptop out from under the counter, this beat-up thing covered in stickers, and he started typing. "We need to scrub your presence," he said. "If he's tracking you, we need to blind him. And then we need to build you a fortress." He helped me set up a virtual private network, a VPN, right there in the lobby. He showed me how to encrypt my messages. We sat there, two conspirators in the fluorescent glow of the motel lobby, plotting the downfall of a man who thought he was a king. But then came the pivot. I asked him, "How am I supposed to work if I'm a ghost in the system?" He looked at my resume, or what was left of it, and he shook his head. "You don't need the system, Valencia. You need the private sector. You need the people who don't run background checks because they don't want the paperwork." He pointed at gig work, TaskRabbit, personal assistant apps, freelance sites, cash in hand, off the grid. Then he pointed at my phone. "But you're not just a cleaner. You told me you managed Richard's schedule, his books, his travel. That's high-level executive management." He opened LinkedIn. I hadn't looked at my profile in years. It was a joke. Valencia Ashford, homemaker, community volunteer. Mateo deleted it. All of it. He looked at me and said, "What do you actually do?" I looked at the screen. I thought about the chaos I was managing, the crisis I was surviving. I typed it in, executive assistant, crisis management specialist. I stared at those words, crisis management specialist. It wasn't a lie. I was managing the biggest crisis of my life. Mateo hit save. And in that moment, the fear evaporated. The humidity didn't matter. The smell of the lobby didn't matter. I took a sip of the terrible coffee and it tasted like victory. I wasn't just a cleaning lady anymore. I was a woman with a plan. That styrofoam cup of coffee tasted like burnt rubber and absolute victory. I walked out of the lobby, clutching it like it was the Holy Grail, and headed straight back to room 104. I locked the door at deadbolt. Chain, the whole ritual. Then I sat down on the edge of that stiff polyester bedspread and opened my laptop. The little green shield in the corner was glowing. My VPN was active. Richard wasn't watching this. He couldn't watch this. I was a ghost in the machine, and it felt intoxicating. I navigated straight to the Atlanta Craigslist gig section. It's a swamp. Usually it's just scams or creepy guys wanting models for artistic photography. But I was desperate, and desperate women do dangerous things. I was scrolling past an ad for a human statue when I saw it. Virtual executive assistant needed. Chaos management specialist, immediate start. No salary listed. That usually means exposure or they want to pay you in good vibes. But something in the phrasing caught my eye. Chaos management, that was Richard's entire existence. I clicked reply before I could talk myself out of it. I kept it brief. I can organize your life. Try me. 5 minutes later, literally 5 minutes, an email notification pinged. It was from Evie. She didn't ask for a resume. Thank God, because mine was effectively radioactive. She didn't ask for a background check. She just dropped a Google Drive link on me with a message that read, "Here's the disaster. Fix it by noon. If you can't, I'll find someone who can." It was 11:15 a.m. I opened the link and my stomach dropped. It was a digital nightmare. It was worse than Richard's desk after a bender. It was absolute anarchy. For a split second, I froze. The old panic started to creep up my throat, the feeling of being inadequate, of being just a homemaker who didn't understand the real world. But then I looked closer. I saw a pattern. I saw a receipt for a client dinner dated March 14th next to a missing credit card charge for the same amount. My brain did that thing it does, the thing Richard used to mock me for. I see dates. I see numbers. I see the lies. I didn't even think about it. My fingers started flying across the keyboard. I created categories. I color-coded the expenses: red for urgent, yellow for pending, green for done. I flagged the duplicate expense. I reconstructed the schedule, blocking out time for deep work and client calls based on the email timestamps. The fan in the room was clicking rhythmically, click, 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 but I didn't hear it. I was in the zone. My back straightened. I wasn't a runaway wife in a motel anymore. I was the director of operations. I was the gatekeeper. I was building order out of chaos. By 11:45 a.m., the mess was gone. In its place was a pristine spreadsheet and a color-coded calendar. It was beautiful. It was power. I hit send. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stared at the screen, waiting. Please let this be real. Please let me be good enough. A minute later, the notification dinged. I opened the email from Evie. It just said, "I've never seen anyone organize a mess this fast. You're hired." I didn't scream. I didn't jump for joy. I just sat there looking at my hands. They were shaking just a little bit, but not from fear. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. It wasn't a sad tear. It was the relief of realizing that after 24 years of being told I was useless, I was actually a goddamn weapon. And then I saw the rate, $40 an hour. I wiped my face and looked at the signature on the bottom of the email. Elena Vance. I didn't know who she was yet, but I knew her type. The client was demanding, cutthroat, and paid $40 an hour. I liked her immediately. Thursday, 11:55 a.m., 5 minutes to showtime. I was sitting in room 312 at the extended stay, staring at my reflection on the black screen of my HP laptop. I had put on my navy bluser, the one I hadn't worn since the disastrous Christmas gala at the Metropolitan Club in 2019. Underneath, I was wearing a t-shirt I bought at a Quick Trip for $3. You know what they say about dressing for the job you want? I wanted to look like a CEO. I just prayed the camera quality wasn't high enough to see the panic sweat beading on my upper lip. The room smelled like artificial lavender and stale air conditioning, but I had propped the laptop up on a stack of Mateo's cybersecurity textbooks, so the background would be just the beige wall. No bedspread in sight. I had to look established. I had to look like Valencia Ashford, crisis management specialist, not Valencia Ashford, homeless woman with a credit score of 315. I adjusted the ring light Mateo had insisted I buy, checking the angle to make sure the dark circles under my eyes were hidden in shadow. A queen is merely a woman who knows her worth, and today I was determining my own market value. At exactly 12 p.m., the notification chimed. That sharp digital trill that makes your stomach drop. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I smoothed my hair, took a breath that was too shallow to actually help, and clicked accept. The screen shifted, and there she was, Elena Vance. She didn't look like the chaotic mess her files suggested. She looked like she could cut glass with her eyes. Sharp jawline, skin that probably cost more than my entire escape fund, sitting in a sleek office that screamed old money and modern power. Behind her, I could see floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking what looked like the Buckhead skyline. "Valencia," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, like expensive bourbon. "I'm looking at your spreadsheet. I have to ask, did you actually do this in 4 hours?" I forced a smile, channeling 24 years of hosting dinner parties for people I hated. "Yes, Ms. Vance, I found a rhythm." Once I categorized the construction invoices by vendor and cross-referenced the dates with the flight schedules, the missing money became obvious. She leaned back in her leather chair, steepling her fingers. "Obvious to you? I've had 3 junior analysts miss those discrepancies for months." "You have a mind for forensic accounting, Valencia. That's rare." "I just like things in order," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "Disorder makes me nervous." "Good," she said, "because Vance Tech is currently in a state of aggressive restructuring. I don't need a traditional assistant. I need a bulldog. I need someone who can look at a disaster and see the architecture of the solution." She kept talking, detailing the duties. Managing her calendar, interfacing with the legal team, handling the sensitive communications regarding the merger. I was nodding, taking mental notes, feeling a surge of something I hadn't felt in years of professional validation. She was looking at a credit score. She was looking at competence. She was offering me $40 an hour. I did the math in my head. That was 3 nights in this motel in 1 hour. That was groceries for a week in 2 hours. And then she shifted her weight. She leaned forward to grab a glass of water from a crystal tumbler on her desk, and the angle of the camera changed just enough to give me a clear view of the wall behind her. It wasn't just art. It was a planning board. A massive magnetic whiteboard covered in index cards, red string connecting photos, and columns drawn in thick black marker. It looked like a detective's murder board in a bad cop show, but this was corporate warfare. My eyes scanned the columns. There was a section labeled assets, another labeled litigation, and then, right in the center, a column in angry red marker that said "Thirts." I squinted at the screen, leaning closer to the laptop. The pixels sharpened. Pinned to the board under that red "Thirts" column were headshots. 3 men. One was a generic-looking guy in a suit. The second was a man I didn't recognize. But the third photo made the blood drain from my face so fast I actually got dizzy. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under the motel. It was Richard. It wasn't a grainy snapshot. It was a high-resolution headshot. The one where he was trying to look visionary, but just looked smug. His name was written in block letters underneath, Ashford Logistics. I stopped breathing. Literally. The air just locked in my throat. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to process 10,000 things at once and just stalls. Why was he on a whiteboard? Why threats? "Valencia?" Elena's voice cut through the haze. "Are you still with me?" I blinked rapidly, trying to restart my brain. I was staring at my husband's face on the wall of the woman who was currently about to hire me. The woman who was, as I suddenly realized, the CEO of Vance Tech, the biggest competitor to Ashford Logistics in the entire Southeast. Of course, Vance Tech. Richard complained about them constantly. He called them vultures. He called them dangerous. He spent Sunday nights shredding documents to keep secrets from people like her. "I'm here," I managed to whisper. My voice sounded thin, reedy. I coughed, trying to clear the lump of terror. I'm sorry. Just a connection hiccup. "I'm here." Elena didn't look suspicious. She just looked determined. She gestured vaguely toward the board, completely unaware that she was talking about the man who had spent the last 2 decades systematically destroying my life. She thought she was talking about a business rival. She had no idea she was talking about a monster. "I was saying," she continued, her eyes hardening, "that Ashford Logistics is making a play for the municipal contract. They play dirty, they undercut, they bribe, they bury people in paperwork. I need someone who understands that kind of ruthless efficiency." I looked at the screen. Richard's face seemed to sneer back at me. Ruthless efficiency. He didn't know the half of it. She thought he was a business threat. I knew he was a criminal. I knew he was a fraud. And I knew exactly where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. I knew about the shell companies. I knew about the forged signatures. I knew about the $200,000 debt. "Ms. Vance," I said, the adrenaline flooding back into my veins, cold and sharp. "I am very familiar with how Ashford Logistics operates. I believe I can be of significant service to you." She smiled, a thin, victorious slash of red lipstick. "I had a feeling you'd say that. Welcome aboard, Valencia. We start immediately." The call ended with a click and the screen went black, showing me my own reflection again. But I didn't see a terrified woman in a cheap motel room anymore. I saw a spy. I had just been hired by the one person on Earth who hated Richard as much as I did. Maybe more. She had the resources, the legal team, and the motive to destroy him. And I had the secrets, I had the dates, I had the proof that Richard Ashford wasn't just a cutthroat businessman, he was a fraud. And men like Richard count on silence. They count on women like me to be too afraid, too broke, and too ashamed to speak up. Well, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was employed. I sat back in the cheap ergonomic chair Mateo had scrounged for me, and a laugh bubbled up in my throat, dark and hysterical. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. Richard spent years telling me I was useless, that I was nothing without him, that I couldn't survive in the real world. He pushed me out of the house, penniless and radioactive, thinking I would crawl back or disappear. Instead, he'd handed me a loaded gun and pointed it right at his head. I was working for the enemy, and the enemy was offering me a way out. I unlocked my phone and opened the Chase app. For the fourth time in 10 minutes. I needed to see it to believe it. 4,520 Talon and 17. The notification said direct deposit, Vance Consulting Solutions. I sat on the edge of the bed this time, a memory foam mattress with actual sheets, and felt my chest loosen. That wasn't a handout. That wasn't charity. That was money I earned with my brain, my organization, and my ability to handle a crisis. It was enough to get me out of the extended stay. It was enough to breathe. I packed my Samsonite suitcase, leaving behind the faint smell of bleach and despair that had clung to room 104. I took an Uber to Midtown, watching the city blur past the window, and walked into this Airbnb like I owned it. It was a one-bedroom on the 14th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen with granite countertops, and a fridge that didn't hum like a dying engine. I dropped my bags in the middle of the living room and just spun around. No Richard, no cameras, no judgment. The first thing I did was go to the store. I didn't go to the discount bakery. I went to the Whole Foods on Ponce. I walked down the aisles and I didn't look at the price tags once. I bought wild-caught salmon. I bought a bottle of Pinot Grigio that cost more than my old hourly wage. I bought fresh basil. Richard used to scream at me if I bought fresh herbs because they died too fast. "You're wasting my money, Valencia," he'd say, spitting the words at me. Well, he wasn't here. I bought 2 packs of basil just to be spiteful. I spent the rest of the afternoon at Lenox Mall. It felt illicit, like I was stealing. I went into Ann Taylor and asked for a fitting room. I walked out with 3 blouses, a blazer that actually nipped in at the waist, and a pair of heels that clicked on the pavement when I walked. I spent $400 on clothes. I remember standing at the register, handing over my debit card, terrified for a split second that it would decline. It didn't. The receipt printed out, long and white, and the clerk smiled at me. "Have a nice day," she said. I smiled back. "I will." That evening, I cooked dinner. I drank wine out of a real glass stem, not a plastic cup. I took my coffee out to the balcony. It was humid, that sticky Atlanta heat, but the view of the skyline was lit up gold and purple. I felt like a queen. I told myself I didn't need to dig any deeper into Richard's schemes. I didn't need to play spy for Elena Vance. I could just be this. I could be a single woman in the city with a career. I saw a notification pop up on my laptop screen, an update from the legal aid clinic about the status of the divorce papers. I stared at it for a second, then closed the window. I'd deal with that later. I was too busy enjoying my life. I had a new apartment, a new job, and a new name on my paycheck. I thought I was safe. You know that feeling when you think you finally outrun the storm? You're inside, the door is locked, the rain is just a noise against the glass, and you finally exhale? Yeah. Don't do that. That is the exact moment the lightning strikes through the roof. I was sitting in the lobby of this cute little renovated Airbnb in Midtown, feeling entirely too pleased with myself. I had just checked my Chase app on my phone and saw that deposit from Vance Consulting Solutions, 4,520.17. It looked beautiful. It looks like safety. I was actually sipping a lukewarm vanilla latte from the Starbucks down the street, scrolling through a playlist. thinking about how I was going to buy some real basil instead of that dried up stuff in the jar I swiped from the extended stay. I felt human. I felt like Valencia, not just Richard's wife or that woman in room 104. And then the glass door slid open and this man walked in. He didn't belong there. You can tell immediately. The Airbnb had that aesthetic, mid-century, modern furniture, velvet sofas, abstract art that didn't mean anything. This guy was wearing a gray suit that had seen better days, maybe 2015, and he carried a battered leather satchel that smelled like stale tobacco and wet wool even from 3 feet away. He scanned the room and landing right on me. It was a targeted look, a predator locking onto prey. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck, that same lizard brain instinct I had when I saw the zero balance on the ATM receipt. I tried to look busy, turning my phone screen off, but he walked straight up to my little velvet sofa. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize for interrupting. He just held out a hand that looked like it had been washed with abrasive soap and said, "Valencia Ashford?" My stomach did a full somersault. I thought about lying. I thought about saying, "No, you have the wrong person," and running for the elevators. But my name is on the lease for this unit, or, well, Elena's virtual assistant booking service is, and I was frozen. So I nodded. I whispered, "Yes." He dropped a thick manila envelope into my lap. It was heavy. Heavier than a credit card offer. Heavier than a bill. "You've been served," he said. His voice was flat, bored, like he was delivering a pizza he knew I hadn't ordered. Then he turned around and walked back out into the Atlanta humidity, leaving me there with the heavy manila envelope and my cooling latte. My hands were shaking so bad the coffee almost splashed onto my navy blue slacks. I stared at the envelope. It was addressed to me at the Airbnb address. I didn't even know he knew where I was. I mean, logically, I knew he could find me, but I felt safe here. I felt invisible. I undid the metal clasp. That sound, clink. It was so loud in my head. I pulled out the stack of paper. The first page was a petition for divorce. Okay. Fine. I expected that eventually. Grounds, abandonment. I almost laughed. Abandonment. I left with a suitcase and a mason jar of change while he emptied our accounts at 1 a.m. But then I turned the page and the laughter died in my throat. It was a criminal complaint affidavit attached to the divorce petition. And the allegations? It was like reading a work of fiction written by a lunatic. Richard was countersuing. He wasn't just asking for a divorce, he was pressing charges. Theft of marital assets, embezzlement of funds in excess of $50,000. And then the line that made my vision blur with red-hot rage, conversion of heirloom jewelry and cash. $50,000? I looked at my phone, the screen showing my balance of $4,520.17. $50,000 would keep me in this Airbnb for a decade. I haven't seen $50,000 in 24 years of marriage. And that's when the memory hit me. It slammed into me like a physical blow. It was 2019. We were doing renovations on the master bedroom. I walked into the den to bring Richard his lunch, and he was kneeling by the floor vent. He had the gray completely pulled off the wall. He was sweating even though the AC was blasting. And he was shoving stacks of cash into the vent hole. He looked over his shoulder, and his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a man hiding money for a surprise vacation. They were terrified. He saw me, and he stood up fast, blocking the hole. "Valencia," he said. His voice was sharp. "Don't ask questions. You didn't see anything. This is for insurance, for security." And I believed him. I always believed him. But that cash, he's claiming I stole it. He's claiming I took $50,000 and jewelry I haven't worn since our anniversary dinner at the Metropolitan Club in 2005. He's not just divorcing me. He's constructing a narrative. He's building a cage. I sat there on the velvet sofa, the fluorescent lights of the lobby humming above me, reading the accusations over and over. Defendant has absconded with liquid assets. Defendant poses a flight risk. He's trying to make me look like a criminal. And I realized, with a slow, creeping terror that started in my toes and worked its way up to my throat, that this wasn't about the $800. It wasn't even about the divorce. If he can convince a judge that I'm a thief who embezzled 50 grand, he doesn't just get the house, he gets me arrested. He gets me arrested. He puts me in a jail cell where I can't access the digital files. I can't talk to Mateo about the VPN. I can't work for Elena. I can't finish the job of exposing the fraud. I looked around the lobby. The guy at the front desk was laughing on the phone. The rain was starting to streak the glass doors again. I felt the walls closing in. I wasn't safe. I was never safe. I looked down at the papers, at Richard's signature at the bottom of the affidavit. It was that jagged scrawl I'd seen 1,000 times. The one that wasn't mine. Men like Richard count on silence, but they also count on the system believing them over us. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was trying to put me in prison to cover his tracks. I'm standing in the middle of this ultra-modern Airbnb lobby in Midtown, staring at my phone like it's a live grenade. And honestly, I think it just detonated. The air in here smells like that specific, expensive vanilla scent they pump into HVAC systems to mask the smell of mildew and desperation, and it's making me sick. I'm looking at the screen, at this document Mateo forwarded to me, and I see Richard's signature. It's not just a divorce petition, it's a criminal complaint affidavit, theft, embezzlement, conversion of assets. He's not just trying to divorce me, he's trying to put me in a cage. He claims I stole $50,000 in cash and jewelry. Jewelry? I haven't worn anything gold since our anniversary in 2016 when he told me my arms looked heavy. The audacity is so profound it almost feels beautiful, like a poisonous flower. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely hold the phone, but then I feel that click in my brain. That cold, sharp snap of survival instinct. If I sit here and wait for his process server to find me, I lose. If I run, I look guilty. I need cover. I need a shield. I need someone who hates Richard Ashford more than I do. I scroll through my contacts until I see the name Elena Vance, my boss, Richard's biggest competitor, the woman whose whiteboard lists my husband as a corporate threat. My thumb hovers over the call button. I'm about to throw myself on a grenade, hoping it's a dud. I step out the sliding glass doors onto the street. The Atlanta humidity hits me like a wet wool blanket, thick and suffocating, but it's real. It's not the curated air of the lobby. I hit dial. It rings twice. Elena Vance, she barks. I need to tell you something, I say, and my voice cracks. It sounds pathetic. I hate it. I clear my throat, stand up straighter, and channel every ounce of dignity I have left. I'm not just a crisis management specialist you found on Craigslist. I'm Valencia Ashford. Richard's wife? The silence on the other end is heavy. I can hear her breathing. I expect a click. I expect screaming. "Excuse me," she whispers, and it's terrifying. "I'm the enemy," I say, talking fast now, rushing before she hangs up. He's filing criminal charges against me right now. He says I stole money. He's trying to make me a felon so I can't testify or fight the divorce. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I found your name on his books. You're the target. He's moving money into Security Systems LLC to undercut the municipal bid, and he used my identity to do it. He forged my signature on a $50,000 loan in 2001 while I was in Maui. He dots his I with a jagged slash, Elena. I dot mine with a circle. I have the proof. I have the PDF. I'm telling you this because I am done being his human shield. I stop. I'm gasping for air, leaning against a brick wall that's baking in the sun. I just confessed everything to the one person on earth who has the most to lose by trusting me. I waited for the judgment. Instead, I heard a low, dark chuckle. It started in her throat and grew until she was laughing. Not a happy laugh. "I'm going to burn your house down" laugh. "That son of a bitch," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "He tried to frame you, using my name as part of his laundering scheme." "Yes," I whispered. "Valencia," she said, and the sound of my name in her mouth didn't feel like an insult anymore. It felt like a weapon being handed to me. "You are not a liability. You are a witness. And you are the best thing that has happened to my company in a decade. You just handed me the keys to destroy him." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast, cutting through the grime of the day. I wasn't alone. The paranoia, the claustrophobia, the feeling that the walls were closing in it all just evaporated. "Check your email," she said. "I'm forwarding a retainer agreement. It's not for consulting work anymore. It's a retainer for the best legal pit bull in Georgia." Consider it a signing bonus. We are going to court and we are going to take everything he has. My phone dinged. I looked down. Subject line, War Games, let's destroy him. Attached was a contract for a legal team that likely charged more per hour than Richard made in a week. I stood up on that hot Atlanta sidewalk, wiped my face and looked at the skyline. I thought I was walking into a trap when I dialed that number. I thought I was signing my own death warrant, but I wasn't. I was enlisting. I went to the enemy for a job and I found a general for my army. Marcus, that is the lawyer, sent me an email at midnight. Paper. He told me digital PDFs are cute, but a Georgia judge likes ink on a page. He needs the originals. And I knew exactly where they were. I am standing outside the Buckhead mansion at 3:15 a.m. It is humid, that thick Atlanta air that sticks to your skin like wet cotton. But I am shivering. I rented a car. I have my phone in my hand. I am recording this. The strap is wrapped around my wrist twice because my palms are sweating. The screen looks grainy like a bad security feed. I walk up the driveway. The Porsche Cayenne is gone. I get to the keypad. The little red light is blinking. I type in the code. 1, 1, Dover 2nd. My birthday. He never changed it. You want to know why? Because men like Richard are arrogant. They think we are too terrified to touch the keypad. He thinks I am sitting in a motel room somewhere, crying. He counts on that silence. The lock clicks. It sounds like a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. I push the door open. The alarm does not beep. I disabled the monitoring on my way out, remember? I step inside. The air conditioning is blasting. 68 degrees. It smells exactly the same. Lemon pledge, old wood, and that metallic tang of fear that I lived with for 2 decades. I know exactly which floorboard creaks near the stairs, the third one from the bottom. I step over it. I am moving towards the home office. The forbidden zone. I pass the master bedroom. The door is cracked open. I stop. I hold my breath. And I hear it, a snore. It is that wet, raspy sound he makes. For years, that sound paralyzed me. But tonight, hearing him wheeze like that, it just made me realize he is a man. A soft, unprotected, sleeping man. I was not scared. I was pissed. I slip into the office. It is dark, lit only by the blue glow of the pool filter outside. I do not go for the desk. Richard keeps the important stuff in the walls. I get on my knees. The carpet is rough. I reach for the metal grate. It is cold. I pry it open with my car key, and there it is. No cash, but a manila folder. Valencia Basic up. I open it. I shine my phone light on the documents, loan applications, credit card agreements. Dated 2001, 2005, 2010. The signatures, mine. But the handwriting, the details? Richard filled them out. He kept them. He did not shred them because he needed them. He kept the proof that I signed them, knowing he tricked me. This is the human shield. This is how he was going to bury me. I stuff the folder into my waistband. I turn to leave, and then I see it. The filing cabinet. It is a 4-drawer steel monster. I try the top drawer. Locked. Of course, but then I notice a sticky note. On the front, it is fresh. Yellow, written in Richard's messy scrawl. It says, Kevin Audit Ledger, do not touch. My heart stops. Kevin, the assistant? Richard does not have auditors, or at least he told me he did not. What ledger? What is Kevin auditing? I try to pull the drawer. It is solid as a rock. I need a key. Suddenly, the floorboard creaks behind me. Not mine, someone else's. I freeze. The snoring in the bedroom has stopped. The silence rushes in, loud and heavy. I am holding the folder that proves my innocence, but I am staring at a cabinet that holds a new mystery, and I can hear footsteps coming down the hall. I look at my phone camera, the grainy image of my own terrified face in the dark. I was in the lion's den, and for the first time, I wasn't the prey. The footsteps were getting louder. Thud, creak, thud, creak. That rhythm is etched into my brain. It's the sound of Richard coming to tell me I've disappointed him, or worse, that he's decided to forgive me. Both options used to make me shrink. Now, they just made me move faster. I had maybe 30 seconds. Before he reached the office door, I lunged for the filing cabinet. That monstrosity took up half the north wall. A steel beast I'd been forbidden to touch for 24 years. I checked the magnetic box taped to the underside. The spare key was there. I turned it. It wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked. It was jammed? No. He'd superglued the lock mechanism. Can you believe the pettiness? He glued the cabinet shut just to spite me. I spun around, panic cold in my chest. Think, Valencia. Where does a man hide the things he thinks no one will ever find? My eyes landed on the coat closet. He always kept the door slid shut. Valencia, don't touch my suits, he'd say. I slid the door open. Darkness. The air smelled of cedar and stale cigar smoke. I reached up blindly to the top shelf. My fingers brushing against rough cardboard, heavy, dusty. I pulled it down. It was a banker's box. Archives 2010-2015 was scrawled in Sharpie across the side. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against his coat. I ripped the tape open. The first thing I saw was the leather, a dark brown ledger bound in calfskin. It looked heavy, expensive. Vance and Hedges. I opened it. The smell was overpowering: old paper, dust, and sandalwood. I shined my phone light on the first page. January 4th, 2011. Source: Ashford Logistics. Amount: $125,000. Beneficiary: V&V Holdingses. I turned the page. My breath hitched. Shellco Valencia. Shellco Valentina. Shellco VA Trust. He named them all after me. He built a fortress of dirty money and put my name on the gate. It was sick. It was a love letter written in fraud. Under the ledger there was a stack of papers, put together with a rusty butterfly clip. Loan applications. Originals. I took the top one. It was dated May 14th, 2010. A line of credit for $50,000. I remembered that year. He told me I needed to sign some insurance riders. I was so tired recovering from that miscarriage, I just signed. I looked at the signature on the paper now. Valencia Ashford. The handwriting looked spiky. Angry. I pulled a pen from my pocket and wrote my name on a sticky note. I held them side by side. My signature, the I has a tiny little circle over it. I've done that since I was 12. It's my mark, my identity. The signature on the loan application? The I was just a line. A slash. Richard Slash? He didn't just forge my name, he erased my personality to make the fraud stick. He thought I was too stupid. I heard the floorboard creak right outside the office door. The handle turned. I didn't panic. I just got mad. I held my phone steady and snapped a picture. The flash was off, but the screen lit up the closet like a lightning strike. I got the logo V Holdings stamped in gold. I got the ledger entries. I got the signatures. I put everything back exactly how I found it. Box on the shelf. Tape smoothed down. Door slid shut. I stood up, brushing the dust from my navy slacks, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. He didn't just steal my name. He tried to make me his accomplice. Not anymore. You know that feeling when the monster under the bed finally shows his face and you realize he's just a sad, tired man in silk pajamas? That was Richard at 4 a.m. The closet door swung open, the hinges groaning in that specific way I'd heard 1,000 times, but never really listened to until that moment. He was standing there, blinking in the dark, looking confused and absolutely pathetic. He expected to see his coats. Instead, he saw me. He saw the box in my hands. He saw the look in my eyes that told him his reign of terror was officially over. He reached out. Maybe to grab me, maybe to grab the evidence, but his hand just stopped in midair. He was frozen. I wasn't. I stepped around him like he was a piece of furniture I was planning to donate, walked out of that room, and didn't look back. Men like Richard count on silence. They count on you being too afraid to make a scene. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious. I got into the car, the engine of that beat-up Sentra humming like a heartbeat, and I drove. The box sat on the passenger seat like a bomb, but instead of explosives, it was stuffed with Vance and Hedges ledgers and forged signatures that were about to blow his entire world to smithereens. Atlanta at 4:30 a.m. is a specific kind of beautiful. The neon is still buzzing, but the sun isn't quite up yet. and the humidity hangs low like a secret. I drove straight to Elena's office building in Buckhead. That glass monolith that looks like a spaceship landed in the middle of the Peachtree traffic. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I pulled up to the designated security dock where Mateo was waiting, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. I rolled down the window. He didn't say a word. He just took the box. "He's done," Mateo whispered. I nodded. "I know." The weight in my chest, that pressure that had been sitting there for 24 years, it just lifted. I watched him walk away with the evidence, and I swear the air smelled different. It smelled like justice. I went back to the Airbnb, locked the deadbolt, and poured myself a glass of that cheap Pinot Grigio I'd picked up at the Quick Trip. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and I waited. It's funny, isn't it, how quiet the world is when you're waiting for a bomb to go off. My phone was sitting on the coffee table, silent. I was just about to close my eye. No, wait, let me back up. It was 7:02 a.m. when the screen lit up. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the Atlanta Business Chronicle. The headline was so beautiful, I almost cried. Ashford Logistics CEO under federal investigation. The article mentioned an anonymous tip regarding financial irregularities and wire fraud. Anonymous. That was me. Well, me and Elena. The servers hadn't even had their coffee yet, and Richard was already the lead story. And then the photos came through. Elena's lawyer, a man who apparently eats sharks for breakfast, had sent over the documentation. Richard was served, not with divorce papers, but with a federal subpoena for identity theft and wire fraud. They got him at the house. He was probably standing in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot, wondering where his wife was, when the agents knocked on his door. I imagined him opening it, seeing the badges, and realizing that the trap he had set for me had snapped shut on his own leg instead. I took a sip of my wine. It was warm, acidic, and absolutely perfect. He thought he could erase me. He thought he could turn me into a ghost. But ghosts don't file criminal complaints. Ghosts don't take down empires from a motel room with a Wi-Fi connection and a grudge. I wasn't a ghost. I was the nightmare he never saw coming. The hunter became the hunted. And I wasn't even finished yet. Let me set the scene for you. It's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I am sitting in a conference room on the 34th floor of a high-rise in Buckhead. The air conditioning is set to 68 degrees, the kind of cold that settles in your bones. And the room smells like old leather and sheer, unadulterated panic. Across the mahogany table sat 3 of Atlanta's most expensive divorce attorneys. They were Richard's team, and looking at them, you would have thought they were the ones about to be indicted. They looked like they hadn't slept in a week. Ironic, considering Richard spent the last 24 years telling me I was high maintenance. There they were, sweating through their $1,000 suits, sliding a document across the table like it was a peace treaty. It was a settlement agreement, and the numbers on it were staggering. $2.5 million liquid transfer. The Buckhead house, free and clear of any liens, even the ones he secretly took out. The Porsche. The Bashan home in Highlands, all of it. They were offering me everything to make one simple thing happen. Silence. They wanted me to agree not to testify against him in the federal wire fraud hearing. I sat there swirling a bottle of sparkling water that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to, and I felt nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. I felt a dark, twisty kind of amusement. 6 months ago, I was counting out quarters for a generic brand detergent at a Quick Trip, wondering if $800 would get me through the week. Now, Richard was trying to buy his way out of prison. With the very life he stole from me, the lead lawyer, a man named Bradley with a terrible toupee and a nervous tic. His left eye cleared his throat. He said, "Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Ashford is prepared to be generous. He just wants this unpleasantness to go away. A no-fault divorce. Clean break. You sign this, we withdraw the cooperation with the investigation, and you walk away wealthy." I looked at him. Really looked at him. "Generous?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. I remembered the sound of the motel room door locking behind me in room 104. I remembered the taste of fear. Bradley, you can't buy clean with dirty money. I tapped the document. I'll take the money. I'll take the house. But I am not signing a no-fault clause. I am not protecting his reputation. If he wants me to walk away from that witness stand, he is going to admit what he did in writing. The silence in that room was heavy. You could hear a pin drop. I pulled out the single sheet of paper Elena's lawyer had drawn up for me. It was simple, brutal. A confession of willful adultery and emotional abuse over the duration of the marriage. It also admitted he knowingly forged my signatures. They hemmed, they hawed, they tried to tell me it was unprecedented. I just stared at them and smiled. I told them, men like Richard count on women wanting to be polite, count on us wanting to keep the family secrets. I don't care about secrets, I care about the truth. Call him. So they did. They put him on speakerphone. I heard Richard's voice for the first time since the night I left. He sounded small, shrill. He wasn't the king of the castle anymore. He was a cornered rat. He screamed at them, "Just give her what she wants! Sign it! Do you want to go to jail for me?" That was the sound of his empire crumbling. Not the sirens, not the FBI raid. It was my husband realizing he was disposable. They printed the final version. I picked up the pen-heavy black Mont Blanc. That probably cost more than my first car. I looked at the signature line. It didn't just say Valencia Ashford. For the first time in my life, I was signing a document. As Valencia Ashford, a woman of my own making. I signed my name with sharp, decisive strokes. I didn't dot the I with a heart. And I didn't use the jagged scrawl he forced me to use on those forged loan applications. I used my own handwriting. I watched the ink dry on the page. I looked at the confession. I looked at the check for $2.5 million. And I realized that while I had won the war, I didn't feel like celebrating. I just felt cold. Clean, but cold. I signed away my past to buy my future. You see that skyline? It looks different from up here. It's not the view from the windshield of a Porsche, and it certainly isn't the view from the window of room 104 at the extended stay. I'm sitting in my corner office on the 34th floor, looking out at West Midtown. It's 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the city is glowing like a circuit board. It's quiet up here, peaceful. The air smells like ozone and expensive espresso, not bleach and fear. I sold the Buckhead house last week. The one with the master bedroom that felt like a cage and the closet where Richard hid his sins. I didn't keep a stick of furniture. I bought a condo in West Midtown. Open floor plan, floor-to-ceiling glass, no dark corners to hide in. It's clean. It's mine. I just finished approving some automated transfers on my laptop. Look at this. It's a beautiful site. 6 figures in the main account, and right here a recurring monthly donation, $10,000 to Legal Aid Atlanta. You remember them? The people I almost had to beg for help? Now I fund them. They help women like the woman I was 6 months ago. And speaking of help, let me tell you how we finally buried Richard. He sat in that deposition room sweating through that bespoke suit, smirking because he thought he shredded the ledgers. He thought he burned the paper trail. He looked at me and said, "You have nothing, Valencia. It's your word against a missing file." It's your word against a missing file. He really thought his secret was safe because the ink was pulp. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who managed his life for 24 years. He forgot that I never forgot a damn thing. I looked at the prosecutor, and I didn't hesitate. I started listing them. June 4, 2011, wire transfer to Valencia Holdings for $45,000. August 15, 2012. I remember I was wearing the Carolina Herrera gown to the Metropolitan Club Gala because Richard spilled Merlot on it that night. He was stressed because he'd just moved $125,000 to the VA Trust at 4 p.m. that afternoon. I recited the timestamp, the account number, the amount. I gave them 50 dates, 50 amounts, exact times of day. I described the texture of the paper he made me sign, the way his hand shook when he thought the auditors were coming. My brain has been a hard drive for Richard's crimes since 2001. He tried to delete the files, but he couldn't wipe my memory. That was the nail in his coffin. He didn't go to prison because of a box in a closet. He went because I remembered. It's strange to think about. 6 months ago, I was standing in that driveway with a Samsonite suitcase and a mason jar full of crumpled 20s. I was terrified. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the handle. I thought I was walking into nothing. I thought I'd die in that motel room. Now? Richard is awaiting sentencing on wire fraud and identity theft. He's small. He's quiet. And I am the head of operations at Vance Tech. I take a sip of this espresso. It's perfect. No cream, no sugar. Just strong and dark. Kind of like me now. I'm not just a survivor, I'm a queen. And a queen is merely a woman who knows her worth. It took 6 months to rebuild 24 years of lies. And I'm just getting started. You know, for a long time I thought the end of this would feel like fireworks. I thought I'd be standing on a rooftop somewhere in Buckhead, champagne in hand, watching the world burn. But the truth is much quieter than that. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 2 o'clock. Just a regular Tuesday in my new office at Vance Tech. The sun was hitting the corner of my desk just right, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, and then the mail arrived. It was mostly junk, bills, a few invitations to galas I actually want to attend now. But then I saw it. An envelope that didn't belong. It wasn't linen or thick cotton paper. It was that cheap, waxy gray stuff they use in the federal penitentiary. Thin enough to see the shadow of the ink through the back. It felt rough, like it had been handled by 1,000 nervous hands. The return address was just a post office box number, but I knew. I didn't need to see his name to know who it was. I opened it, and the smell hit me first, that stale, metallic scent of institutional air and old coffee. The handwriting was shaky. Can you believe that? For 24 years, I watched this man sign checks worth millions. I watched him forge my signature on loan documents with a steady, arrogant hand. He used to dot his I's with those sharp, jagged little slashes when he was pretending to be me, remember? But this? The letters on this page were trembling. They looked like they were written by an old man trying to write in a moving car. He wrote 3 pages. 3 pages of "I'm sorry" and "the pressure of the logistics industry, and I did it for us." He actually claimed the stress made him lose his moral compass. I sat there in my Herman Miller chair holding this flimsy piece of paper, and I just laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh exactly, but it sure wasn't a sad one. It was the laugh of a woman who realizes the monster under the bed was just a pile of dirty laundry all along. He wasn't a genius. He wasn't a kingpin. He was just a thief with a good suit and a god complex who couldn't handle the consequences of his own greed. I remember the forged signature on the 2010 loan, the way he confidently scrawled Valencia Ashford, to steal $50,000 while I was sitting by the pool in Maui. That hand was steady then. This hand was terrified. I read the letter once. I didn't skim it. I read every single self-pitying word, looking for the man I feared. The man who could make a room go cold just by walking in. He wasn't there, just a hollow, desperate ghost blaming the economy for his own crimes. Men like Richard count on silence. They count on you being too scared to speak up, too scared to open the mail, too scared to look at the bank statements. But silence works both ways. You can use silence to hide, or you can use it to destroy. I stood up, walked over to the industrial shredder in the corner, and I fed the paper in, much louder than the one he kept in the locked home office. The machine whined for a second, sharp and violent, and then it ate him. Zids! Gone. He asked for mercy. I gave him silence. The hum of that industrial shredder finally died down, and let me tell you, the silence that followed, it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was full. I stood there in my office on the 34th floor, looking down at the pile of confetti that used to be Richard's 3-page apology, and I didn't feel a thing. No rage, no sadness, no vindication, just light, like I'd been carrying a suitcase of rocks up a mountain for 24 years and someone finally cut the straps. I walked over to my desk, the Herman Miller chair Richard would have said was too expensive for someone like me, and I picked up my phone. I opened the Chase app, my thumb hovered over the screen. I had millions now, legally, rightfully mine, sitting in accounts that only I could touch. But looking at that 7-figure balance didn't give me the rush that the next transaction did. I typed in the number slowly, $800. Exactly the amount I had in that mason jar the night I crawled out of that driveway. With nothing but a Samsonite suitcase and a prayer, I hit send. The screen blinked. Transaction successful. I sent it to the Extended Stay America Housekeeping Fund. In the memo line I typed, for room 104, in honor of Mateo Rodriguez. See, Mateo was the night manager who looked at me, a 50-year-old woman with a suitcase and no credit cards, and didn't see a liability. He saw a human being. He gave me a key card when the system said I shouldn't have one. That $800 isn't charity, it's a seed. If Mateo uses it to help another woman with a black eye and a prepaid phone, then that money did more good in 10 seconds than Richard ever did with his embezzled millions. I grabbed my bag and headed for the elevator. I wasn't running this time. I wasn't hiding. I was walking. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open and I stepped out onto Peachtree Street. It was humid, that thick Atlanta air that sticks to your skin, but for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. It didn't feel like a chokehold. It felt real. I could smell the exhaust from the midday traffic, the faint scent of roasted peanuts from a street vendor, the expensive perfume of a woman rushing past me to get to Lenox Mall. I walked past the storefronts. I caught my reflection in the glass of the Ann Taylor window. I stopped. I really looked at that woman staring back. The straight shoulders, the sharp navy blazer, the eyes that didn't dart around looking for threats. I realized I didn't look like a missing person anymore. I didn't look like Mrs. Ashford. That name, that title, it was a costume I'd been forced to wear, a corset that pulled tight until I couldn't breathe. Richard used to sneer at me holding the checkbook like a weapon and say, "You have the attention span of a gnat, Valencia. Don't worry your pretty head about the finances." He thought I wasn't listening. He thought I was just the decoration in the corner. But I was listening. I remembered everything. The court order restored my maiden name, but honestly, I don't even need that. I'm not Mrs. Ashford. I'm not the victim of room 104. I'm just Valencia. Just me. It's funny, you know. Richard spent decades trying to mold me into something that looked good on his arm but had no voice. He controlled the thermostat, the friends, the food, the thoughts. And now, I control an empire. I walked past the Fox Theater, the neon sign buzzing in the late afternoon sun. I remembered sitting on the floor of that motel room, eating a stale vending machine granola bar, wondering if $800 was enough to survive a week. I was terrified. I was alone. Men like Richard count on silence. They count on you being too afraid to check the credit score. They count on you believing the lie that you are nothing without them. They count on that fear keeping you in room 104. But look at me. I took the $800, I ran, and I burned his world down. I took a deep breath, tasting the city, the freedom, the future. The traffic light turned green and the city moved forward. So did I. I'm not gonna lie, the road from the extended stay to the corner office was paved with panic attacks and 2 a.m. crying sessions on the bathroom floor, but I made it. And if you're sitting there right now, listening to this in a dark room or a car, let me be the one to tell you the fear is a liar. Your worth is not a number in a bank account that he controls. A queen is merely a woman who knows her worth, and sometimes you have to burn the castle down to see that you were the queen all along. So if you're listening to this in room 104, or any room like it, take the $800. Run and burn the world down if you